Hello and welcome to today's workshop on understanding and embracing KPIs. Before we get started, let's just have a quick run through of what will be covered in today's workshop. So we're going to go through several topics that will hopefully allow you to understand and maximise the benefits of KPIs by the end of today's workshop. Firstly, we'll take a look at what a KPI actually is, and then we'll take a look at why they're important. Following that, we'll delve into where to start. So if you've never tracked your KPIs before, we'll have a run through of how to get started with it. Then we'll have a look at some examples of essential KPIs. And after that, we'll have a look at using PPS and how that fits into your KPI monitoring. And lastly, we'll take a look at how to use your KPI data. So what exactly is a KPI? KPI stands for Key Performance Indicator. And unlike some of the industry buzzwords that you hear bandied around every now and again, a KPI is actually a really important part of any successful business. So it's defined as a quantifiable metric or data point that can be used to measure and evaluate performance and success. KPIs are typically used to indicate progress towards specific goals or objectives. So why are KPIs so important? Well, KPIs provide clear, data-driven insights into whatever you're evaluating. Having access to KPIs enables you to make informed decisions, set measurable goals, and optimize performance. KPIs are imperative to the success of businesses of all shapes and sizes. In a nutshell, KPIs should form the basis of all of the important decisions that are made in your clinic. And the reason that we can trust KPIs to steer us in the right direction is because they are based on data that you have put into your system yourself. So it's based on real life data, and that data is based on your specific business. It is unique and relative to you only. So, where to start? If you've never tracked KPIs before, which most of you should have in some form or another, you may not have formalised the process as KPI tracking, but you'll certainly be monitoring some things that would be considered key performance indicators, like your monthly revenue, patient retention, and that kind of thing. So when you actually sit down to think about defining a set of KPIs, it will be important to think about the aspects of your business that you would like to evaluate in order to measure success. So again, this will be quite unique across clinics, but it will be defined on what you would like to achieve, so what your goals are and how you can measure them. And that will form the basis of your first set of KPIs. Our top tip here would be to start simple. For even more help getting started, for each of your KPIs, you can follow this basic framework. Step 1. Define the KPI. Use your business plan or goals to determine your KPIs. Step 2. Determine the data source. Identify where the data you need is stored and how or if you can easily extract it. Step 3. Set a time frame. Define the period of time over which you would like to measure the KPI, e.g. weekly, monthly, or annually. Step 4. Gather and calculate the data. Source the data needed and export accordingly. Step 5. Calculate the KPI. Most KPIs have an applicable formula that will help you to output your report results as easily readable metrics like percentages. Step 6. Analyse the results. Are you on track towards your goals? How do the results match up to your benchmarks? Is there a need to further break down the data in order to understand the implications of the KPI? Step 7. Take action. Make any necessary changes to ensure that you continue to progress towards your goals. And Step 8. Review. KPIs should be regularly monitored to give you a full picture. When choosing your KPIs, there are quite a few elements that need to be taken into consideration. It's unfortunately not quite as simple as just choosing a set of metrics. Some of the things that you'll need to consider include data availability, time periods, achievable outcomes, privacy and compliance, benchmarking, balance, and long-term perspective. Let's have a look at what each one of these means for you in a bit more depth. Data availability. Do you have access to the data needed in order to measure your chosen KPIs? Or if not, can it be collected with relative ease? An easy way to think about this would be to consider what you already record in PPS. And if you don't currently record that data in PPS or any other software facility, is there a way that you can collect that missing data in a cost and time effective manner? Time periods. Not all KPIs are equal. When defining your KPIs, you will need to consider how frequently each one will need to be measured and how that fits into your current working schedule. Some things to take into consideration when defining these time periods would be that more frequently measured KPIs will give you a more detailed insight. But equally, it's also very important to ensure that the time spent measuring KPIs can be matched in actioning change. Achievable outcomes. The real value in your KPIs will come from your reaction to the results. So it's important to consider whether your business is set up to adapt and if you are willing to make changes. Otherwise, there won't be much point in you spending that time actually defining and monitoring your KPIs. So there needs to be some room for change. Privacy and compliance. It is vital to ensure that any data that you are collecting and analysing is compliant with data regulation laws. So it will be important to consider the type of data that you're using. You can also utilise PPS GDPR features such as people who have opted to be excluded from processing, and ensure that exported data is handled correctly. This might include using some of the PPS report tools to anonymise the data that you are using. Benchmarking. So this one's really key, but it is also something that may come with time. So in order to create a benchmark, you can look at industry standards or competitors' metrics to set a benchmark against which you can compare your data to establish where you are at. But you can also create your own benchmarks. And it's really important to be realistic. So if this is the first time that you are looking at your KPIs, it may be that your benchmarks come a few months down the line when you've had a chance to collect data, or it could be something that you can create immediately if you have that historical data to reflect on. Balance. It's really important that your KPIs paint a full picture. Consider using both predictive and historical metrics. Predictive metrics help you to make proactive decisions. Historical metrics assess past performance. Using a combination of the two provides a comprehensive view of your organisation's performance. One example of a historical metric could be patient churn rate. This metric calculates the percentage of patients who stopped using your services over a specific period, for example, the past year. This would provide you with historical data on patient attrition and can help you to assess trends in patient retention and identify periods with higher or lower churn rates. You could then use this information to form strategies to improve patient loyalty. One example of a predictive metric would be a patient appointment forecast. This metric uses historical appointment data and trends to predict future patient appointments. It would take into account factors such as seasonal variations, patient preferences, and past appointment patterns to estimate how many appointments the clinic can expect in the coming months. Using a predictive metric like this could help with resource planning, staff scheduling, and ensuring that your clinic can meet patient demand efficiently. Long-term perspectives. Think about the long-term impact of your chosen KPIs and whether they provide you with the ability to achieve sustainable growth rather than just short-term wins. and assess whether you're already capturing data that has provided you with the tools to make long-term sustainable changes. It's also important to take into account your business plan. Have you got a 5-year plan? Is it a 10-year plan? Or is it more short-term? Take this into consideration when thinking about your chosen KPIs. Let's have a look at some examples of essential KPIs. Now, essential KPIs will be defined by your business needs and may vary from clinic to clinic. So what we're about to go through are some examples of KPIs that may be applicable to a private healthcare clinic, but they may not apply to you. But hopefully what we're about to go through will still help you when you're defining your own KPIs and looking at how to measure them. So some examples that we're going to be taking a look at today include tracking revenue growth, patient retention, DNA rates, and diary occupancy. So revenue growth. Firstly, what do we mean by that? So if we were looking at tracking revenue growth as a KPI, we would be looking at the increase in income across revenue streams over a period of time. So the first step in monitoring revenue growth would be to define a time period. So that could be quarterly, annually, or more or less frequently than any of those measures. And you want to export the data for the chosen period of time. Now, in order to get the revenue growth that's been achieved, you would need to compare this with a previous period of time of the same length. So if I've looked at my revenue for the past 12 months, for example, I would want to also find historical data for another 12-month period that I could then compare that to. Looking at those two data sets side by side would show me whether we've had any growth in revenue for those defined periods of time. And I have also included a formula on the screen here that enables you to calculate the revenue growth as a percentage. And when looking at those results, a positive percentage would indicate revenue growth, while a negative percentage suggests a decline in revenue. To get a bit of a deeper insight, you could then start to analyse the factors that are contributing to the revenue growth or decline. So that could include changes in the number of patients, price adjustments, the introduction of new services, or any other changes that you have made within the clinic. And then using this data, you can begin to set goals for the future. So you can set a target for realistic revenue growth, or if you've found that there is a decline in revenue, you can set targets for how to improve that. An easy way to obtain data on revenue growth using PPS would be to run a charges report, and you can break that down by charge code or description to see revenue across different income streams. Next, let's take a look at patient retention. So that can be defined as the number of returning customers and repeat appointment bookings. So just like we did with the last KPI, we'll need to start with defining a period of time over which we want to measure this data. This could be monthly, quarterly, annually, or any other period that's relevant to your business. For this particular KPI, you'll also need to identify a group of patients that you would like to include in the analysis. You could keep this nice and simple by just simply saying all patients that have had an appointment within the last 12 months or 6 months, or you could make it specific and you could take a look at all patients that have been to your clinic for a particular type of treatment. The group of patients that you choose here should be defined by your business needs and if you have any areas of concern or any particular goals that you're looking to work towards. So once you have your time period defined and your group of patients, then you'll need to look at how many patients from your chosen group have returned for additional appointments or services within that time period. These would be considered your returning patients. And again, I've popped a little formula on the screen here where you can work out the patient retention rate as a percentage simply by dividing the number of returning patients by the number of total patients in your chosen group and then multiplying that number by 100 to express it as a percentage. Now, turning these metrics into percentages gives us a really easy way of having a look at how well we are doing with this particular KPI. So in this instance, a higher retention rate would be indicated by a higher percentage. And that would give us an idea of how well we're doing, how satisfied our patients are, and what we're looking at when in terms of patient loyalty. And as will be the case with all of these KPIs, there will always be additional factors that you can analyse to get a deeper insight into just that top level figure. So of course, your patient retention rate will be influenced by factors such as service quality, the level of communication, appointment scheduling, appointment availability. There could be lots of things that are influencing this. And once you've got that top level data, so you can see what your retention rate is, you will know by how high or low that percentage is, whether you need to spend any more time looking more deeply into this and setting any plans in place to improve that rate. A great way to be proactive using PPS in improving patient retention rates would be to run a client report and select the clients in current treatment with no future appointments. So this gives you the opportunity to communicate with any clients that have recently had a treatment but do not have their next appointment booked. DNA rates. So when we're looking at DNA rates as a KPI, we're going to be looking at the number of appointment cancellations or no-shows. So by this point, you know the drill. The first thing we're going to need to do is define a period of time. And then within that period of time, you're going to be looking for the number of cancelled appointments, which you will then compare against the number of total appointments scheduled within that period to get your DNA rate. So to work that out as a percentage, you can use the formula that I've placed on the screen here. And then that will give you an idea of what your current DNA rate is and whether you need to put in place any strategies to improve that, or whether you need to delve a little more deeply into the results, or whether you're actually pretty happy with that and you can keep it ticking over as a KPI that you will monitor, but that you don't need to action at the moment. So here, of course, the smaller the percentage, the better. And a higher rate might suggest some issues with scheduling, appointment availability, patient engagement, or even your DNA policies. So this will give you the information that you need to then tackle that head on. An easy way to take a look at your DNA rates using PPS would be to run an appointments report with the status of did not attend. And then you can use a breakdown or criteria to get more details on DNA reasons. So this will just give you a bit of insight into where the numbers are coming from and if there are particular reasons that are causing your DNA rates to be a bit higher than you would like. So lastly, we'll take a look at diary occupancy as a KPI. So when we're looking at diary occupancy, we're thinking about the number of available appointment slots that have been filled. So with this one, like with all of the others, the first step would be defining a period of time. And then within that period of time, you're going to be looking at counting the number of booked appointments against the total number of available appointment slots. And again, I've included a formula on the screen here, which enables you to get the diary occupancy rate as a percentage. If your diary occupancy rate is high, this may indicate that we're doing really well and we're filling all available appointments, or it may also indicate that there is a gap when it comes to the supply and demand. So could we possibly open up more availability to fit in more patients? Or are we just at that right level where we are filling all of the availability and we're at max capacity? If your diary occupancy rate is a little lower than you would like, this could lead to you changing up some of your available hours, perhaps communicating with patients to see when would be more suitable to have the clinic open and make appointments available. Using PPS, you can run a diary statistics report to show diary occupancy rates, and you can also apply filters such as location or practitioner or anything that's applicable to your business to give you a bit more detail and insight. So hopefully by now you're all starting to feel a little bit more confident when it comes to KPIs. So let's take a look at how PPS can help. If you're using PPS to manage all of your clinic activity, you'll have access to a rich database of information that can be used to monitor your KPIs, create benchmarks, and track progress towards your targets. So basically, if you've been using software to run your clinic, you're at a great advantage because you should have a wealth of data readily available at your fingertips. PPS contains a reports wizard that allows you to easily manipulate the parameters of your data searches. So within PPS, you have access to a multitude of preset reports, but within each of those reports, you also have the facility to further manipulate the criteria so that you can output exactly the data that you are looking for. So there are a few different ways to utilize the reports facility in PPS, and we'll just have a quick run through of the differences between those reporting options. So firstly, we've just got reports, and they will make up the bulk of PPS's reporting functionality, comprising of a large range of reports that cover all of the major elements of PPS. These reports are highly configurable, giving you the tools that you need to find exactly what you are looking for. PPS also includes summary reports. So these are a condensed version of the full reports section that allow you to pull simple quantitative data for a wide range of statistics. And lastly, we've got stats and summaries. So these will help you to create graphs and charts using your PPS data. So that's a nice way of looking at data over a period of time as well, just popping that into a graph so that you can see any upwards or downwards trends nice and easily. So I've just mentioned that in PPS, we have a section that contains a whole group of highly configurable reports. So let's just take a look at some of the tools that are available for each of these reports that will enable you to get your specific KPI data. So for each report that you are running, you can apply a date range, which, as we know, is imperative to finding your KPI information. Each of those KPIs that we just went through, the first factor in starting to monitor them is defining a time period. So being able to add a date range to your report sets that time period within the data set that you are extracting. So the next option that we have in the reports section is to include a breakdown. So what this will do is separate the data and show you the results broken down by the information that you have chosen. So a good example of this is if I am running a revenue report, I want to look at my total revenue for the last 12 months, but I also want to be able to look back at it in a little more detail and see that revenue each month. So I would include a breakdown of month when I'm running my report so that I've got that total figure, but I can also then go back and look at each individual month. This one's a really good one and can be applicable in a lot of scenarios that we have just talked about when we're looking at those KPI examples, and it can really help you to get a deeper insight into a data set. So next we've got criteria, and this one is a great option for when we are looking at some very specific data. So if I was looking at my patient retention rate as an example of a new service that we've added in the last 12 months, I can go to the criteria section of my report and make sure that I am only looking at the data that relates to patients who have had that particular treatment or service. This means that it's automatically excluding patients who've had all other treatments or service in our clinic because they're not particularly relevant for this outcome that I'm looking for, and it will give me the data that's just based on that service. So then I can see whether we're actually getting returning custom from that treatment and whether we want to continue offering that service in the clinic. And of course, that's just one example. There are lots of ways to use this criteria section, which also include excluding data, and it's worth having a little play around with them, or if you are struggling to get the exact information you're looking for, you can always contact our support team. They have lots of experience in helping PPS users find specific data using this criteria section. And lastly, we've got the print/preview options. And the options that you see on this tab will vary across the different reports. But basically, it's just allowing you to choose different information that you'd like to see displayed on the final report outcome. So if there's particular data that you're looking for, always remember to check the print/preview options tab to make sure that you've checked everything that's relevant to the data set that you're looking at. So when it comes to KPIs, there will always need to be some form of continuous monitoring to help you get the full picture. So for your KPIs, you will need to review the defined metrics multiple times at your chosen intervals. There are a few ways to achieve this or make the process easier using PPS. So the first option here would be to apply a date range. So as we've just seen in the last section where we looked at manipulating reports, each PPS report allows you to apply a date range. Using a date range in conjunction with the breakdown option to collect data that spans over a longer period of time allows you to pull out data that gives you the same result as continuous monitoring in one fell swoop. So if I'm, say, running a revenue report for the last 12 months, I can use a breakdown of month and it will show me the results for the past year without me having to do that each month. Of course, this means that I haven't been reviewing that data per month, so you'll have to think about whether running that report annually with the breakdown allows us to still get the same outcome, but it's there as an option so that we don't have to run a report daily, monthly, weekly, or however frequently we require the data. So another way to make things a bit easier and just streamline the whole process would be to create favourite reports. So again, we just had a chat about configuring the reports in PPS. So if you've taken some time to apply specific criteria, breakdowns, date ranges that will be applicable each time you're exporting that data, you can then save that report to your favorites so that you don't have to go in and apply all of that custom criteria each time you run that report. So that means that if you're running this report on a regular basis, you are saving the time in setting that report up and being able to get the same results at the click of a button. And within PPS, you can create as many favourite reports as you need. And lastly, you have the option to export the data. So we will have a look at this in a little more detail on the next slide. But basically, you can export the data to enable further manipulation and use it for things like chart or graph creation. And you can use the custom Excel output option to export the data exactly how you want it. So this can include excluding any data you don't need or that may go against privacy considerations, which you might remember we talked about right at the beginning of today's workshop. Okay, so let's have a look at extracting data from PPS. So all data that resides in PPS can be exported to further investigate or monitor. So this really allows you to dig deep into the data to get that full picture for your KPIs. So when it comes to extracting the data, what options do we have? So number one would be to print the data. If you want to have paper copies, if you're looking at building a report to communicate to your staff, your team, stakeholders, you can print the data so that you can share that information or include it as part of a presentation. So another option that you would see on the reports output screen in PPS is to save the results as a file. And what this does is allows you to export the results of your report to a file in either XLS, TXT or DBF format. Most people probably use this and export the data as an XLS, which you can open with Excel or Google Sheets or anything along those lines, which will then allow you to further manipulate the data. This is great for if you are doing some continuous monitoring and you want to look at the data side by side and you are extracting it on a regular basis. So if I was looking at my patient retention rate, I might run this report every month and export the data to XLS so that I can pop it side by side using Google Sheets or Excel, and then I can create a graph or a chart that shows me the activity over a period of time. And lastly, you can choose to do a custom Excel output. So we did briefly touch upon this as well in the last slide, but this one is great for choosing the exact data that you need from your report. So every time you run a report in PPS, whether that's a revenue report or an appointments list report. It's going to be collecting all of the data that's associated to whatever you are searching for. And when you create an Excel output, so if we're just choosing the Save as File option, you might get quite a lot of fields that you don't actually need. So you might get the date and the time of the appointment, you might get the name of the practitioner and the room, where all you want to look at might be whether that appointment was cancelled or whether the patient arrived. So using the custom Excel output, you can define exactly which fields you want to include in your output, and then that means that you're not having to then go back through to that spreadsheet and delete unwanted columns or rows. If you're a PPS Express user, your reports section will look a little different to the reports wizard that is featured in PPS. PPS Express features all of the core reporting functionality without some of the extra features like breakdown options or criteria. But don't panic. All of the KPIs that we've covered in today's workshop are easily achievable with PPS Express and many more too. So here are our top tips on how to maximise the reports in PPS Express. Number 1 would be to use the date range facility. So as we've discussed a few times throughout today's workshop, applying a date range is a key aspect of KPI reporting. Each report available in PPS Express has the option to choose a from and to date to help narrow down your data search results. Secondly, consider your export options. Exporting your data is nice and easy. You have 2 options when it comes to extracting your info from PPS Express. You can either print the results or email them to yourself or a colleague, or any email address really. Choosing printing does give you limited format options such as print to PDF, which may make it more difficult to utilise or manipulate the data in a useful way. Emailing the data is a little bit more handy, so it will send you a copy of the results in a spreadsheet format that you can then choose to open with your preferred platform such as Excel or Google Sheets as an example. For KPI reporting, this is probably going to be your best option, especially for long-term monitoring or comparing data with other data sets. And lastly, you have the power to manage your data output. So when you export your report results from PPS Express, you get the full data output. This enables you to potentially utilise one report for multiple purposes. Let's take the appointments list report as an example. When exporting the data, you will have visibility of the dates and times of the appointments in your chosen date range. This can be used for your diary occupancy KPI. You'll also get the appointment status included, so that would be something like arrived or completed, etc. And so it will also include those appointments that have been marked as did not attend, which gives you the data needed for your DNA rate KPI. So as you can see, even in a smaller number of pre-configured reports, you still have access to all of the info needed to start successfully monitoring your KPIs. Understanding what your KPIs are telling you. Once you have your KPIs in place and you are regularly outputting the data like a pro, the next step is to analyse the results. It's easy to take the data at face value, especially when it looks positive. Looking at diary occupancy as a KPI example, let's have a look at what we might do to further analyse the data. So let's say that your diary is 90% full each month. Fantastic work. Do we just leave it there? You could take this as an opportunity to really look at that data to make sure that you're not missing out on other opportunities. So some implications of this figure could be that you may be turning business away because you don't have enough availability. You could be subjecting returning customers to long wait times for their next appointment, or you could be ignoring periods of downturn if they are short-lived enough not to make a blip on your reports. So although this approach might seem like it focuses on identifying potential negatives, what it is actually doing is adding context and value to the basic numerical output that you were starting with. The key takeaway here is that by analysing the data, you can identify areas of weakness or potential and form strategies that will keep you on the right path towards your goals. So before we wrap up today's workshop, we're going to have a quick look at how to use the data. So once you've identified your KPIs and you're happy with the reporting system that you've got in place to extract that data, we're going to want to keep on top of things. So make sure that you are continuously evaluating that information, and that will enable you to identify areas of strength and pinpoint where you can improve. And one of the important factors that we mentioned right at the beginning of today's workshop is the ability to adapt. So make sure you're using that data to optimize strategies where needed and update operations, processes, and policies. So you will know as a result of the data that you are outputting where you can make change and where you can make improvements. And just make sure that you have the room to do that. And lastly, you're going to want to continuously review, regularly monitoring KPIs to identify trends and patterns and assess whether your efforts to improve are effective. Without these three elements, you're basically just looking at a load of data on a page. And I know you wouldn't be here in this KPI workshop in the first place if that was your intention. So that brings us to the end of today's workshop on understanding KPIs and maximising the benefits. Hopefully, you all feel a little bit more well-informed than you were at the start of the workshop today. And if it's something that you're not already doing, I hope that you've now gained the confidence to go out and start looking at monitoring your KPIs, even if you just start with one and build up from there. If you do feel like you need a little more guidance or help on anything that we've discussed in today's workshop, we do offer free training. If you're not already using PPS, we also offer free trials and free demos. You'll be able to book your free training, start your free trial and book a free demo via our website, privatepracticesoftware.co.uk. And we also have a support website, which is full of loads of help guides and videos which run through our reporting system. You'll find that at ppssupport.com. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you do have any feedback on today's workshop or there are any other subjects that you'd like to see covered, please let us know. You can email us at support@rushcliffe.com and hopefully we'll be able to keep bringing you some more valuable content. Thanks. Bye for now.